Okay, let's just talk about a few, test out our knowledge here. True or false? Why do you say that? Right. So it does not take into account any project interactions. So there's no diversification effects in sensitivity analysis. This is a little more, this you got to compare a little. Can people read that? Is it big enough? That's the right answer. So all we're doing is comparing the fact that A is 15% is higher than the 12, 12 is higher than the 10, and the 9 is higher than the 8. So those are the projects that would be chosen using these rules. Is that true or false? Why is it false? Actually, they do. That's one of the problems that you have in Monte Carlo analysis, is specifying the range of probability distributions. Okay, let's try a quick in-class problem. I said quick, but so just some practice at calculating the coefficient of variation again. Notice that the probabilities are all the same. And I did that purposely because that means you can then use the STDEV function in Excel. You don't have to do them all manually. Remember, like you had to do in Chapter 4? You can use the standard deviation function in Excel. Okay, expected NPV. Does anyone have a number? 350,000, standard deviation. Other answer? 854 is the right answer, so we have a coefficient of variation of 2.4, that's right. So, what did we do here? So the expected NPV, you can use the sum product function in Excel, where all you're doing is multiplying the probabilities times the NPV. The standard deviation function, because there are equal probabilities, you can just use STDEV function, and that calculates the standard deviation from D10 to D13. And then the coefficient of variation is simply the standard deviation divided by the expected net present value. Any questions about that? The arithmetic? Okay, the model. For Chapter 12. It goes through the case, the MRI project that was in Chapter 11, has all the different input variables over there, all the different cash flows, and then it does a sensitivity analysis. On volume, on salvage value, on those two variables. Then you have to actually copy it over to the third table for data for graphing, and then you can see the effect on volume salvage value. So what do you notice about the graph? What does management need to worry about? Again, volume, because the slope of the line is a lot steeper than it is for salvage value. And there's the scenario analysis, again with the same kinds of worst case, most likely, and so on. There are real options. Again, there's not a lot of, I wouldn't focus on this as much as I would the top part of the model, because it's about timing options. Okay, are there any, that's the only content I had to present on risk analysis. Other comments or questions at this point? Okay, my three examples of where theory and practice diverge in project risk analysis. Two of these are not my examples. Two of them are actually from MHA classmates of mine. The first one was a classmate who worked at a long-term care facility, and she was charged with looking at how the dietary department is configured and processes the optimal configuration of capital and labor. So she did a large study, and it took a fair amount of time looking at all the different food flows and so on. And she concluded that there were opportunities for improvement in efficiency by replacing some workers with some automated equipment, specifically dishwashing equipment and food cleaning equipment. And so she did a capital budget analysis. She looked at what could go wrong, what could go right, and management approved it, and it was done. And the numbers that she projected, in fact, were realized. But there was a non-financial fallout from the decision. And the fallout was because the equipment replaced 5 or 6 different kitchen workers. And what happened then was that morale plunged in the dietary department as part of sort of the HEDIS measures that this organization had a whole long quality and board measures that the board routinely reviewed. Employee satisfaction plunged in that department. And she had to go before the board and talk about, yeah, we're saving lots of money, but boy, people hate working here. So that was a consequence that most people would fail to anticipate, but it was a non-financial consequence that affected the way that the decision was actually made. So the second example was the lesson learned there is that there are non-financial consequences to financial capital decisions. The second example was this classmate who I really felt badly for, but does anybody know what are patients, the number one complaint that patients have about hospitals? Food, parking, wait time. Anybody else? But none of those are number one.
Smell.
Noise is the number one complaint. There's people can't get to sleep because there's people banging around the carts and people being waken up at 3 in the morning from people talking or whatever. So this classmate of mine, they took that, decided to take that very seriously and tried to reduce the noise level in that hospital. So they did all kinds of analyses, and they decided that the way to do this was to install this new carpeting that would reduce the level of noise on patient units by 15, 20% or whatever, because it would absorb the sound wave. So they ended up buying a ton of this carpeting for the hospital. And so it was delivered on a Friday afternoon, and essentially because the main access to the wards was through the fastest access was through the lobby. They dumped all this carpet in the lobby of the hospital. Hundreds of rolls of this thing, all stacked up. Friday evening, a tractor trailer pulled up. A guy walked out, goes to the evening supervisor of the hospital, shows her some forms and says, "You got the wrong carpet. This is not the carpet the hospital ordered. We will take this back and we will deliver the correct carpet tomorrow morning." So they spent the evening hauling all this carpet into this tractor trailer. Tractor trailer left, hospital never saw it again. And it was stolen. The thieves just stole all the carpet. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of carpet. That did not figure into a risk analysis. You hadn't thought that might happen. Sorry?
Sorry, I'm thinking about the thieves now. Like, how do you even unload that kind of merchandise? Is there a black market for actual market?
Yeah, there's probably 100 restaurants, and this stuff was expensive and it was worth a lot of money. So they would take it to other states. Who knows where it went?
Inside job.
Sorry?
Yeah, right.
It's an inside job.
Sounds like an inside job. I never heard what the outcome was. So the second lesson from project risk analysis there is that you know what happens. There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of risk that you can never project or estimate or even consider. The third example is an example when I was a consultant. I got hired by a small rural hospital to do a strategic plan for them. They wanted to know where the building was starting to get old. Should we replace the building? Should we fix it? Should we get into different lines of business? What should we do over the next 5 to 10 years? So I spent a few months there, and I did all the different scenarios, all the different revenue, what was happening to the population, or physician supply. I came out with 3 different scenarios of best case, expected case, worst case, and under all 3 scenarios, all 3, the net cash flow from each scenario was negative. I could not make, under the rosiest assumptions, I could not get negative, could not get positive cash flows over the long run. So now I'm in a dilemma. I'm a consultant. I've been hired by the board of this hospital. What do I do? Do I give them the bad news? Do I paint it rosy? What do I jig the numbers? What do I do? So I made the decision. I'm going to tell it like it is and let the chips fall where they may. I presented it at the board meeting, and the chair of the board just ripped into me. Said, "You have no understanding of our community. We've got a bright future." And yada, yada, yada. In reality, the community was shrinking in size. A physician had left. The building had holes in the ceiling. It was dripping water into the patient beds. I mean, the place was a disaster. But there was, so at the end of all this, after he finished everything, he said, so I make a move that we fire this guy, and I was fired from that project. So what happened after me? They hired another consultant, which is, and with those of you going into consulting, this is not unusual, where a consultant will give a client an answer, and it's the answer that they don't want to hear that answer. So they hire another consultant to give them a different answer, hopefully. I don't know what the second consultant told the board, but I do know that today, my recommendation to the Ridge board originally was to turn it into a community health center, to abandon the inpatient facility and have a community health center. And today, that's what they have. They don't have an inpatient facility anymore. So what I learned from that exercise was, my cash flows were perfect. My risk analysis was perfect. It was great. But if the outcome threatens the identity of the community, if it's not what people want to hear, the most perfect financial analysis goes in the dump. Okay, any other questions or comments? Jessica?
In that situation, can you recommend that they look for someone to acquire them if they're not being able to maintain?
Yeah, I mean, I have a long list of options. Amy. I got to show it to you sometime.
I mean, even in that scenario, they weren't going to be not positive.
No, I mean, merger, acquisition, divestiture, conversion, long-term care facility was another option. I mean, there was all kinds of different things that were there. But they absolutely felt the identity of the community was contingent upon having an acute care inpatient facility. I mean, this happens all the time. I did some consulting work with National Memorial Hospital in the western part of the state a few years ago, and they converted to critical access hospital status, and it took the CEO at the time. It took him 7 years to convince the medical staff that that's what they should do, because the medical staff were so invested in having a 60, 70 bed hospital they could not see under any circumstance moving to a 25 bed hospital because it threatened the identity of the community. It was a signal to the community that we don't need a 70-bed hospital anymore. We can get by with 25. But that's not a community that's growing and thriving. So there's a lot of emotion and feelings that can be generated by these kinds of things. Okay, let's take a break.